Hey, sister students, today we're going to hit George H.W. Bush, president number 41. All right, H.W. Bush comes in. He was Reagan's vice president for 2 terms during the 80s. He promises that he's going to continue Reagan's policies. And he's going to add in, he's going to try to improve education, fight drug use. And he makes this big push that says, I'm not going to raise or implement any new taxes. So he says no new taxes. That's a big thing, one of his big campaign promises going into the 1988 election. When he gets into office, his biggest problem is the growing budget deficit. So the United States is going more and more into debt. He was able to cut military spending because the Soviet Union falls apart in 1991 and the Cold War ends in 91 when the Soviet Union falls apart. But a big thing that he did in 1990 is he agreed to increase income taxes on the wealthy, but never really made a significant reduction in the budget deficit. Now, the problem with increasing income taxes on the wealthy is he had made the big campaign promise of no new taxes, and then he goes kind of back on that promise a little bit by adding new taxes. Okay, I'm going to kind of talk here real quickly about spending on military defense spending and how that affects the U.S. economy. Now, we know that economies love war. It's one of our rules of history. We're in the middle of the Great Depression. World War II starts, and we start to get pulled out of the Depression. Same thing in World War I. So the positives is it can provide a short-term stimulus, pull the country out of recession. Negatives, though, it can take away money from other things, and it can slow the long-term economic growth. Can lead to a budget deficit. So as Reagan continued high military spending, we went further and further into debt. And we even go back, we talk about the Vietnam War, and Johnson had all these big plans, a great society. We're going to help the poor. We're going to build education. We're going to do Medicare, Medicaid, help the elderly, help healthcare, all this stuff. But he wasn't able to give it the money it needed to thrive because so much money was sucked away by the Vietnam War. Okay, Bush is able to help swing the Supreme Court a little bit. He chooses 2 new conservative Supreme Court justices, David Souter and Clarence Thomas. In 1990, the Bush administration is kind of hit by a little recession in the U.S. economy. The downturn is blamed on reduced spending by consumers, businesses, and governments. So we're at the end of the Cold War. Things are starting to go down spending-wise. Also, there's an increase in foreign competition abroad, and so there's less demand for American products. People aren't buying as many American products. That hurts the U.S. economy. And so places in the Northeast where the manufacturing had been so big for so long, people are moving out of those areas. Jobs are beginning to decline. People are moving from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, and we see a little dip in the economy here at 1990. Domestic policy issue that Bush helped with was the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, or the ADA. This prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in finding employment and having public accommodation. So people with disabilities need to be able to access all public areas like restaurants, hotels, theaters, etc. They had to install ramps for wheelchairs and put in things where people with hearing impairments could hear, places where blind people could read Braille and have sign language interpretations wherever possible. And employers had to make special accommodations to help disabled Americans find work. All right, the H.W. Bush administration does see the end of the Cold War officially end. So we talked about last time, Reagan's policies, Gorbachev's policies. Eventually the Soviet Union collapses, and it turns into 15 different countries. Now, you can see on this map here the 15 different countries and how the Soviet Union was split up. 1989, important date, Berlin Wall is torn down, Germany is reunited, and ultimately 1991, Soviet Union collapses, Cold War is officially over. Turning to the Middle East, foreign policy under Bush, you've got the Persian Gulf War in 1990. So we have this guy's name is Saddam Hussein. He was the leader of Iraq. Iraq invaded Kuwait because Kuwait had large oil reserves that Iraq wanted to take control of. And so Hussein sends his military into Kuwait to take over those oil reserves. The United States and the United Nations work to try to get him to withdraw from Kuwait. He refuses. And so UN forces, mainly led by the United States and H.W. Bush, move into Iraq and force Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis out of Kuwait. Ultimately, February of 1991, Hussein agrees to pull all of Iraqi troops out of Kuwait and repay for the damages that he caused while in Kuwait. They caused a lot of environmental damage, set a lot of oil wells on fire, etc. A lot of problems that Kuwait is still dealing with today.